I hope I'm getting this right. Avri joins us on the show. He goes by DM online. That's a little easier for me. How close did I get with the pronunciation?
Yeah, it's fair, good enough.
Good enough. All right. Thank you for being generous. You and I were chatting online, and we thought we should probably just take this conversation into the show because it really kind of came from a spot of, hey, I want to bust a few misunderstandings. And you run the PowerShell on Linux account. You're a sysadmin by day. And I thought, let's get on and talk about why somebody who's a Linux user is choosing to run PowerShell, something that sounds so crazy to some of the audience. Let's start there.
Yeah, so you're right. So I'm both a Linux and Windows sysadmin, and the main reason I choose to run PowerShell is because it comes built in on Windows, and we all know that Windows is not like the easiest platform to install software to. So if anything comes built in, it's nice. And that's pretty much where I started. And then the more I used it, the more I liked it. So that's pretty much it. And then when Microsoft open sourced it, I was like, oh, great. I can have this tool that I used every day because at work in many of my jobs, I had to use Windows because, corporations. And then I can use the same tool to build stuff or run stuff on at home at my Linux machines.
Couldn't the counter argument simply be, but Bash is good enough?
Yeah, it could be. But the way I see it is PowerShell is another tool. You can choose to use it. You can choose to not use it. It's also really nice that it's kind of like a way to bridge the gap. So if you're a Windows admin and you use PowerShell every day, and then all of a sudden you have to start administrating Linux machines and you're not very used to Bash, then PowerShell can kind of bridge that gap for you. So it's familiar. Not everything is the same. Microsoft is doing a lot of work to bridge PowerShell core. In PowerShell 7, they're going to drop the core and then kind of consolidate the Windows and Linux and Mac versions. So if you already know PowerShell from Windows, then all of a sudden you can do a lot of great things in Linux. Also, Bash is not object-oriented like Python, for example. So you get a lot of. I keep finding that in PowerShell it's a lot easier for me to do some things.
Could you give an example? I'm kind of curious. I thankfully don't have to administer many Windows machines right now.
There's a PowerShell command that's it's called PowerShell commands are verb and a noun. So it starts verb hyphen noun. So you have a PowerShell command get date. So that command returns the date object. So once you have that date object, it's really easy to do on that object. That if you save it in a variable, it's really easy to do add days and then add the amount of days that you want to add. For example, I build a very simple PowerShell script that converts a bunch of Linux podcast shows from whatever time zone they are to my time zone, so it's easier for me to figure out when they are.
That's great.
I like that. It's good thinking.
And it's very simple. So you work with objects. The objects can be date, or it can daytime, or it can be strings. So it's really easy to find. If you have a Linux config file, it's really easy for you to find things in the file and replace it or sort it in a certain way. You want to skip lines. A lot of stuff is very easy for me, at least, and I think for a lot of PowerShell users that come from Windows to do the things that are not using grep and all kinds of Linux commands could be scary for people that never use them.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It also makes me think it's a nice sort of middle ground. Sometimes I have to do stuff in Python if it's just too complicated in Bash. And that sounds like PowerShell kind of has those abilities built in, richer data structures right out of the box.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the nice thing is that it's built on .NET Core, which is really nice that Microsoft is open sourcing. Yeah, I'm probably going to get crucified for it, but whatever. and it gives you a lot of access to .NET Core APIs that you can use, and there, for example, C# libraries that you can use from Linux. For example, I had this task at work. I have over 100 and something accounts and the vendor doesn't have an API. So I had to go and find invoices in this 100 plus accounts. And so I went online and then I found, this guy created a Selenium PowerShell library.
Nice.
It's really nice. It's really easy to use. And then I was like, I use I use it at work on my Windows machine. I wonder how hard it will be to port it to Linux.
Right, my thought too.
Yeah, so I was like, so I played around with it, fiddle with it a bit and figure out like exactly how the object is built and all kinds of stuff. And I started working on it, and so before that, I used to be a kind of like a Git consumer or GitHub consumer. I used to, clone repositories, compile them, use them.
Sure. Right, same. That's most of mine.
Yeah, but because I work with PowerShell every day, and I felt comfortable. Like I felt like I can actually do this. And then when I got it to work on my Linux desktop at home, so I submitted a GitHub PR request. And this guy, he's really nice. That's another amazing thing about the PowerShell community. It seems like they're all very nice. So he merged it, and now I added more stuff. I added more features. I updated all kinds of components in this thing, and you can just install PowerShell. Download this, this like simple command, install this module, and then all of a sudden, you in a single command, you have like this, you can start Chrome or you can start Firefox, and so in simple commands, you can tell the browser, here, go to this URL, find this, text box, enter this text, find this button, click next. I used it for all kinds of experiments, like I built like a web parser that gets me all the lottery numbers here in Israel and generate based on this like little stupid algorithm what's going to be the next winning numbers. And there's no API for that. You accept going to this lottery URL and noting all the numbers down. You don't really have a way to do it. So if you know a little bit of PowerShell, or if you don't, because it's pretty simple. It's like single commands, and every command does one thing, and they're all this verb noun thing. So it's very self-explanatory, kind of like what the commands do. Then you can do a lot, and that's just one example. So after I started playing with this module, I figured I'm going to build I wanted to build a website so I started a Telegram group and a Twitter, and I wanted, so I created PowerShell on Linux.com.
Let me ask you about that. So, a few moments ago, you mentioned, you mentioned kind of like sort of tongue in cheek that just even mentioning something positive about Microsoft is a little risky. And now you have PowerShell on Linux.com, plus you have the PowerShell on Linux Twitter account, where it's essentially it's one part advocacy and one part instructional and informational too. But there is genuinely an advocacy component here, and do you feel like it's a little bit of dangerous waters still?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. PowerShell is open source. It's and I got this arguments from a lot of people, like, Microsoft can take it back, blah blah. It's not exactly GPL license. It's MIT license.
Right.
But the genie is out of the bag. You can't put it back in the bag. They can try. I mean, they can try to do something like that. And then it happened with other projects like MB, and then people forked it and made Jellyfin, because once it's already out there, somebody will create give it a different name, and they can't take it back. And I don't think they will. And I mean, if you could use Bash, it's a great tool. If you could use Python, it's a great tool. This is just another tool in your Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
you could use it or you cannot use it. I can give you another example where it kind of bridges the gap, and I think it allows Windows sysadmin to start living their Windows boxes and really. So there's another module. It's called DBA tools. It's a PowerShell module that allows you to manage MS SQL servers from Linux using PowerShell. So
nice.
So now all of a sudden, I'm a Linux sysadmin, but I have to manage this one application that runs on MS SQL server, and
that was the majority of my career when I was in IT.
So everybody has this Microsoft Dynamics or something that's just they're like, it's an accounting software, you can't get rid of it because you have to keep it forever or whatever.
And someone has to support it, of course.
And somebody has to support it. And you want to run Linux. What do? You can install a Windows VM and install this, the SSMS, the SQL Server Management thing.
Yeah.
And manage it from there. But if you don't want to do that, you want to stay in your Linux island and do the things the way you like, then all of a sudden you have this tool. You import this module. It's I think based on their website, it's 75%. It has 75% Linux support, but it's better than Vista. They have 0% Vista support. And you can run SQL queries. You can get the data. You can, in PowerShell, convert the data to like a JSON file. And that can even help you, if you have a Python script or something that so it will bridge the gap.
That is really very nice.
Yeah, so you could save it to a CSV file, you can save it to XML, whatever you want, and then read it in another tool.
Yeah, this looks way nicer than bashing strings together and piping them to MySQL or something.
Yes. Exactly. So for me, I like Bash, and don't get me wrong, but because it's very text based, it's the good thing about it, and it's also the worst thing about it for me, because if you have to work with text, and you need to figure out all these special commands, and because PowerShell is just like Python, is object oriented, you could do amazing simple things so easily in one command, and then you start having all these modules, and the community is so great. So the other day I found out there's a FreeNAS module for PowerShell.
Wow, really?
So now all of a sudden, I have this FreeNAS box that I use for my home lab and whatnot. So all of a sudden I'm like, I want to create a new volume. Then I download this module, I import it, and then I have connect FreeNAS server or something. I give it the name of the server, the credentials, and poof, I'm connected. And then I have other simple commands new volume or whatever, new FreeNAS volume. I don't remember the exact command.
Right, but then you can start scripting your own little environments and handy helpers.
Yeah, exactly. So then, so you start at home, and then all of a sudden you take it, and because the API is very similar between FreeNAS and TrueNAS, you can use the same. I think the same library supports TrueNAS, and then you take it to work, and then at my job, I have to administer a bunch of different storage systems. So we have, because the application we build integrates with different SAN providers and stuff like that. So I have to administer NetApps and Isilon and all kinds of weird, FreeNAS is not weird, but other weird storage vendors. So if they have PowerShell support, then all of a sudden, from my Linux box, it's really easy for me to automate the deployment of all this stuff, because I have one interface, which is PowerShell, and I have all these different modules.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Okay, so you've made it. You've obviously sold us on some of the neat things you can do if you learn PowerShell. I'm curious, are there any myths? Things us Bash users might think about PowerShell or be scared about? It is certainly foreign. Any myths you can bust for us?
Can you give me an example?
I think a big one would be probably the biggest go-to would be, well, it's a Microsoft project and they're just trying to use it to control Linux or something like that. Like those kinds of things.
So I get. I mean, that's kind of like what a lot of people are saying. But you could say the same thing about VS Code, and you could use VS Code to write Go or Python or whatever. I mean, you could you could say that probably, about many products that exist in the market.
You could make that argument for Intel and why they contribute GPU code to the kernel. They want to sell more Intel machines.
Exactly. Or I don't know, Red Hat makes, some of the components of their operating system is proprietary. So maybe they're trying to take over. Every corporation its job is to make money. But the way I look at it, they're trying to make money. I have a ton of work to do, and I'm trying to do it as quickly as I can with as little. I'm a lazy sysadmin. That's what I keep saying in every job interview that I went to.
What I would have done to have this 5-10 years ago, what I would have done,
Right.
This would have changed everything for me.
Exactly. I can tell you when I lived in the U.S., I worked for. I'm not going to name the company, but I worked for one of the biggest insurance company in the U.S. Creating an Active Directory user used to take 30 to 45 minutes because of all this special stuff, like this all special configuration. And using PowerShell, I kept saying, like, we would hire 30 people and then they wouldn't pass their, insurance selling exam, and then we'd fire half of them. And then I would just spend hours creating these accounts and then deleting them, which was crazy. So then that's pretty much how I started with PowerShell. I was like, I'm not going to spend hours. This is like,
it's funny.
There has to be a better way.
That is how it always goes, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is how I started. And like, everybody you start with the simple things. Okay. How do I create the account? How do I do this? How do I do that? And slowly but sure, you get to the point of, it doesn't happen in a day. That's why I created this community. I wanted to, and it's not, I call it PowerShell on Linux, but it's not just for Linux. If you're a Mac guy and you want to join, come in. I'll help you out. The other day, some guy from a university, I think in the US, came in and he's like, I'm trying to automate this user creation, which is probably a problem that anybody has. And he was running on Windows, and we try to help him out. So if you're interested, if it sounds interesting, I'm not trying to sell you anything. You can use it or you can not use it. But if it sounds promising, then that's pretty much what I want to do. I want to give people, not everything is golden. For example, a lot of the Active Directory modules don't work on Linux yet. I took it upon myself. I keep talking to different people from Microsoft, from all kinds of places, like, I have this module, can you test it on Linux? So I downloaded it on my box, and then I think one of the Azure SQL team member on Microsoft, they have an official SQL Server module. So he said, hey, it works on Core, it should work on Linux. I already know that it's not true, because sometimes there's all kinds of little things that make you break. So I downloaded the module, I try to import it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's, Linux file system is case sensitive and Windows is not. So then all of a sudden this file has a lowercase letter in it, boom, it doesn't break. So then I created a PR and not a PR, an issue in their system, and I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to make the PowerShell experience on Linux much better, so then more people won't have to go to Windows to do their day job. And I think that's probably if Microsoft was trying to extinguish Linux, there's no way they would have open sourced this, because it's pretty much the tool that allows you to manage all these Microsoft things without Windows.
This has been really, really informational. This has been great. Like I get my appreciation now of how this enables people like myself that wanted to run Linux and now manage Windows boxes. It means it's likely this is going to enable more Linux desktop users.
And sometimes maybe Windows is the right tool, but you don't want to touch it for these reasons. Now you can't.
So we have in the show notes, we'll have a link to PowerShellOnLinux.com plus the Twitter account, as well as some of the favorite modules you have, and that one that you talked about for FreeNAS as well.
on the side, if you go to PowerShellOnLinux.com, by the way, that website runs on PowerShell.
Yeah.
What?
That's great.
There's this amazing guy. His name is Adam Driscoll, if I'm pronouncing his name is right. He created this. It's called Universal Dashboard, and it's a PowerShell module that allows you to run all these amazing dashboards. So, and because it's PowerShell, and PowerShell has, it has like commands for REST APIs and all kinds of crazy things. You can, I used it to build this site, but you could use it to, I don't know, let's say in JB you have all kinds of things you want to start, and you want to have buttons, and you have all these different APIs. You can use this PowerShell module to run the site, and you can very easily create buttons that when you click on that button, it creates a REST API call, or it gets information from somewhere and it shows it on the dashboard. It's this module. I think it has a community edition, which is also open source, and a bunch of people have been contributing to it. It also has a paid version if you want like certain like authentication features with like Active Directory and all kinds of stuff. It shows you how strong PowerShell is. Like you can run a website on it, and you can run this dashboard on a Raspberry Pi. You can run it on an Ubuntu box. You can run it on Arch. You can run it on Windows. I don't know if it runs on WSL yet. I don't know if you've seen. I think I sent it to you on Telegram. But using this neat Android application called Userland, I was able to run on my Android phone. I was able to run Arch. Inside Arch, I was able to run PowerShell. On PowerShell, I was able to run the dashboard. So I can have a dashboard on the go with like APIs to all kinds of neat things.
That is pretty cool.
That is wild.
I love that. That's so nerdy.
I'll send you the link. It's kind of like OS Inception, I guess. Like
definitely
thing inside a thing inside a thing. But I just played around with it. I was like, I'm a tinkerer. I want to see if it'll work, and I was amazed to see that work. I also I don't have an iOS device, but I wanted to see if I can get PowerShell to run on iOS using Ish, but I think there's like a GitHub repo for it.
That's maybe worth exploring. You should keep us posted. You know how to get a hold of us.
I feel like we could have probably a few more future conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
So do keep an eye on like the developments of what's going on, and just keep us in the loop, and we'll try to pass along tidbits in the show, and maybe we'll have you back in the future.
Right. Sounds like there's an exciting future for PowerShell on Linux.
Yes. DM, thank you for joining us.
I hope so, and thank you for letting me tell the story.
Have a good one. Thank you for also joining us fairly late from Israel. We appreciate you staying up to hang out with us.
Have a great day.